If this story touched your heart, I'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and let's see how far this story has traveled. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. And hit that notification bell because tomorrow, another unforgettable story awaits you. One that just might change the way you see love, fate, or even yourself. Until then, stay inspired, stay curious, and thank you for being part of this journey. What started with a mistake became the love story of a lifetime. Jenna Moore had never felt more out of place and more exhilarated than she did that evening. The Grand Concert Hall in downtown Seattle was glowing with elegance, its crystal chandeliers shimmering like stars overhead. As she pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped inside, her breath caught. She had made it, barely. After sprinting from a delayed bus and navigating the maze of velvet ropes and elegantly dressed patrons, she finally found her way to her seat. Or so she thought. With her heart still pounding from the rush, Jenna slid into the plush red chair in the front row center stage. Her palms were slightly clammy, her breath unsteady. She smoothed her dress, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and tried to settle in. For someone who had spent weeks saving for this single night of beauty and escape, the seat felt too perfect. As the lights began to dim and the first quiet notes of the orchestra hummed into the air, a voice, low, calm, and unmistakably male, spoke from beside her. "You're in my seat." Jenna froze. Turning slowly, she looked up into a face that seemed more like a magazine cover than real life. The man standing over her was tall, mid-30s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal grey suit that hugged his frame like it had been made just for him. His eyes, cool and sharp, met hers with quiet authority. I think this is my seat," Jenna stammered, fumbling for the crumpled ticket in her purse. But before she could even unfold it, an usher appeared, already flustered. "Mr. Hayes." "I'm so sorry," the woman whispered, glancing nervously between them. "There must have been a mix-up in the seating chart." Mr. Hayes. The name echoed in Jenna's mind. It sounded familiar, like something she'd heard in the news or seen on a real estate billboard. But she couldn't place it. The man's expression didn't change. He glanced at Jenna, then at the usher, and then, unexpectedly, he gave a small nod. "It's all right," he said, his voice smooth. "She can stay." Jenna's eyes widened. "No, I don't want to take your seat. I can move." "I insist," he said simply, lowering himself into the seat beside her as if it were all completely normal. And just like that, the music swelled around them, violins dancing through the air, drowning out Jenna's confusion. She was too stunned to speak, too aware of the man now sitting inches from her, someone who clearly didn't belong to her world and yet had just invited her to stay in it. Who was he? And why did it feel like this night, this mistake, might be the start of something far more than she ever expected? Jenna tried to focus on the music, but her attention kept drifting to the man beside her, Lucas Hayes. Even his name sounded like it belonged in headlines and high-rise buildings. He sat relaxed, one arm resting along the back of his chair, his posture effortlessly confident. He didn't look at her again during the performance, but Jenna could feel his presence like heat. Every time a new note rang through the hall, she wondered what twist of fate had landed her in that exact seat at that exact moment. When the final crescendo faded and the audience erupted into applause, Jenna clapped politely, but her mind was spinning. As the crowd began to stand, she turned to him, hesitant. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said, her voice just loud enough to rise above the chatter. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment something shifted in his expression. "You looked like you needed to be here." She blinked. "I did. I've been saving for months just to buy a ticket. This orchestra..." She paused, searching for the right words. "They've been my dream to see live, ever since I was a kid." His gaze didn't waver. "You love music." She nodded. "I do. It's always been my escape." Lucas's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more like curiosity surfacing. "I get that." "I used to play," she added, unsure why she was telling him this, maybe because he was still listening. Really listening. "Violin," Back in high school, but you know, life happened. Rent, bills, adult things, he tilted his head. So you just gave it up? I didn't really have a choice, she replied, laughing quietly. I mean, music doesn't exactly pay the rent unless you're a prodigy. Or unless you're lucky, he said. Or rich, she muttered, and then immediately regretted. Sorry, that was... He waved it off, amused. It's not untrue. Jenna shook her head, trying to pull herself back into reality. Anyway, I should probably go. I've already hijacked your seat and your night. But Lucas didn't move. In fact, he leaned slightly closer, his tone shifting. There's a private lounge upstairs, quiet, no crowds. Would you have a drink with me? Jenna's breath caught. Was this really happening? This man, clearly wealthy, clearly powerful, wanted to continue this... Whatever it was? Why? She asked, before she could stop herself. His expression didn't falter. Because I think there's more to you than you let on, and I'd like to find out. Jenna hesitated. Every reasonable voice in her head told her to walk away. But her heart, the part that once belonged to music, to dreaming, was already leaning toward yes. She stood slowly. Okay. One drink. Lucas smiled then. Not flashy, not cocky, just real. And as he led her through the crowd, Jenna realized something. This night wasn't just a lucky accident. It might be the beginning of something she didn't know she still wanted. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a hallway lined with dark marble and gold accents. Jenna followed Lucas inside, still unsure if she was dreaming. Everything felt surreal. The moment she stepped out of the elevator and into the penthouse, her breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the room, showcasing the Seattle skyline glowing under the night sky. The city felt both distant and close, like it had been paused just for them. She turned slowly, taking in the space. Rich mahogany floors, soft ambient lighting, a fireplace crackling low in the corner. Every detail was precise, intentional, expensive in a way she couldn't quite wrap her head around. And then her eyes landed on it. In the center of the room, lit by a soft overhead spotlight, was a glass case. Inside, a violin. Not just any violin. It looked handcrafted, old, maybe, even priceless. Its wooden body had that subtle curve and warm glow only time could create. Jenna drifted toward it without thinking, her feet moving before her mind caught up. Lucas watched her silently. That's a 1780 Italian Giuseppe Guarneri, he said, his voice low. It's one of the few left in the world. She stared at it, stunned. It's beautiful. You used to play, he reminded her. Jenna nodded slowly. Yeah, but I haven't touched a violin in almost 10 years. Lucas stepped beside her, his presence steady but not overbearing. You miss it. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her hands, the same hands that once knew how to bring melodies to life, how to lose themselves in music. Now they just typed emails and held coffee cups. I miss who I was when I played, she admitted. Lucas unlocked the glass case and gently removed the violin, his movements careful, like he was handling something sacred. Then he held it out to her. Then find her again. Jenna's heart pounded. Lucas, I can't. What if I don't remember how? What if I mess it up? He met her gaze. It's not about being perfect. It's about remembering why it mattered in the first place. Her fingers trembled as she took the instrument from his hands. The wood felt warm, familiar. She tucked it under her chin, let the bow hover just above the strings, and then she played. The first notes were shaky, uneven, but honest. Her body remembered before her mind did. The music came slowly, then all at once, flooding the room like light through open curtains. Her eyes burned, but she didn't stop. When the final note faded, silence fell. Jenna lowered the violin, breathing hard. Lucas was watching her, really watching her, with something in his eyes she couldn't name. That, he said softly, is who you are. And for the first time in a very long time she believed him. The room was still. The last note Jenna played seemed to hang in the air like a question with no clear answer. She carefully placed the violin back into its case, her hands still trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of everything she'd Just felt. She turned to Lucas. He hadn't moved. He stood there, arms loosely crossed, eyes fixed on her like she'd just revealed a part of herself he hadn't expected to see. And maybe he had. That was beautiful, he said softly. Jenna gave a nervous laugh. It was rusty, I haven't played in years. Still, he said, it meant something. She looked away, unsure of what to say next. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was loaded, thick with things unspoken. Then Lucas stepped forward. He looked different now. Not colder, not softer, just stripped down. There's something I need to tell you, he said, his voice lower now, quieter. Jenna's heart skipped. Okay. He moved toward the bar, poured himself a glass of whiskey, then paused, almost like he was buying time. Finally, he turned back to her, holding the glass but not drinking. I didn't invite you up here just for a drink, he admitted. It wasn't about the concert or the seat. Jenna tilted her head, confused. Then what was it about? Lucas stared at the glass for a long beat before answering. It's about what I saw in you. She frowned slightly. Lucas, you don't even know me. No, he said. But I recognize something in you. Something I've lost. He finally looked up, his gaze raw, unguarded. I was raised to believe emotions were liabilities, he continued. That vulnerability was weakness. My family, they valued control, power, legacy, never truth, never connection. Jenna's breath caught. I built everything I have by playing by those rules, he said, voice hardening. I became exactly what they wanted. Successful, sharp, untouchable. And in the process, I forgot who I was before all that. He took a slow sip of the whiskey, then set the glass down untouched. But tonight, when I watched you play, when I heard that first imperfect note, I remembered. Jenna swallowed hard. She hadn't expected this version of Lucas, open, honest, breakable. I don't let people in easily, he said. Not because I don't want to, because I don't know how, but with you, he paused, his voice catching just slightly. I want to try. Jenna stepped toward him slowly. Lucas. He didn't move, just waited, like whatever came next was up to her. I didn't come here looking for anything, she whispered. But you've made me feel seen, like I matter even when I'm not perfect. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle, grounding. You do matter, he said, steady now. And for the first time since the night began, it wasn't the music, or the view, or even the chance to play again that filled Jenna's chest with fire. It was this moment, and the possibility that this wasn't just a spark, it was the start of something real. Weeks passed, then months. What began as a mistake, a wrong seat at a concert, had unraveled into something Jenna never could have predicted. Her life began to shift in quiet, unexpected ways. Lucas didn't just keep his promise to help her reconnect with music, he made space for it. For her. He cleared his schedule to attend small community recitals with her, cheered her on as she relearned complex pieces, and listened without interruption when she shared dreams she hadn't spoken aloud in years. And in return, Jenna began to see the man behind the reputation. Lucas Hayes, the name people whispered like legend in boardrooms, was surprisingly gentle in the quiet moments. He had a dry sense of humor, a love for late-night walks, and a habit of staring at her like she was something he'd been waiting a long time to find. One evening, as the sun dipped below the Seattle skyline, painting the city in gold, Lucas led Jenna down a winding path tucked behind one of his properties, a private garden filled with soft lights and blooming lavender. The air smelled like spring. The world felt still. Jenna looked up at him, puzzled. What is this place? Lucas didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Jenna's heart stopped. I never planned for this, he said quietly, his voice steady but full of something raw. But then you happened. He took a breath, dropped to one knee, and opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, timeless. I love you, Jenna, not just because you reminded me who I used to be, but because you make me want to become someone better. I don't want another day to pass without you knowing that. I want a future with you in it. Tears welled in Jenna's eyes before she even realized it. The woman who once convinced herself that dreams were impractical, who silenced her own heart to survive, was now standing in the middle of something she had never dared to imagine. She nodded. Yes, her voice breaking. Yes, I want that too. Lucas stood, slipping the ring onto her finger, and kissed her like the world had finally aligned, and in that moment it had. The months that followed were not without challenges, but they were full of music, full of rediscovery, full of two people learning together what it meant to be seen, loved, and chosen. Jenna no longer looked in the mirror and saw the girl who let her passions go. She saw a woman who took a chance, who walked into the unknown and found not just love but herself. And as Lucas held her hand during their first private recital together, her on stage, him in the front row, this time by choice, she smiled, knowing deep in her bones, this wasn't just a beautiful story, this was her new beginning. If this story touched something deep inside you, maybe a memory, a forgotten dream, or even just the idea that love can find us in the most unexpected ways, I want to hear about it. What part spoke to you the most? Was it Jenna rediscovering her passion, Lucas opening up for the first time, or maybe that quiet moment when a single wrong seat changed two lives forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Whether it's one sentence or a whole story of your own, your words matter here. I read every comment, and trust me, you never know who you might inspire just by sharing how a story made you feel. And hey, where are you watching from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. What city, what country are you tuning in from? Tonight, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell icon so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. Because yes, there is more to come. And who knows, the next story might feel even closer to your heart. Until then, keep dreaming, keep feeling, and never stop believing in the unexpected.